May 29, 1453. Mehmed II of the Ottoman Empire has finally conquered Constantinople, the city of world's desire. The Eastern Roman Empire is in ruins, its emperor is missing in action, presumably dead, and the Turks have cemented their legacy as the dominant power in the region with 200 more years of conquest laying ahead of them. Generally, this event is regarded as a turning point in history and the peak of Greco-Turkic relations, but nearly 1000 years earlier, the situation was massively different. In those ancient times, Greeks and Turks did not fight each other, they fought side by side. Because preceding the establishment of the Ottoman Empire in Bithynia, before the Seljuks invaded Anatolia, and even long before the Khazars fought alongside Roman armies against the invading Arabs, a mighty Turkic Empire was actively negotiating with the Romans in Constantinople. The Göktürk Khaganate, the first transcontinental steppe empire ever, it was also the first state to actively carry the name Türk. These so-called Celestial Turks ruled supreme over the entire Eurasian Steppe Belt in the 6th and 7th centuries. As they reached the Eurasian frontier to the west, an incident with the Sassanian Persians led their leader, Istemi, to initiate diplomatic relations with the faraway Eastern Romans in Constantinople. A few decades, envoys and treaties later, the Göktürks and the Romans were fighting side by side against Persia and eventually, together, rode to victory. This Turko-Roman alliance of late antiquity is actually well documented in several sources, but has been neglected in academia and practically hidden from the public. The time has come to unravel early Turko-Roman relations once and for all and analyze both the circumstances, characteristics and legacy of this rather unlikely alliance. How did this affect the history of Eurasia? Let's find out.
Shout out to all of our supporters on YouTube and Patreon who made this video possible. The Göktürks should not need an introduction to avid followers of Khan's Den. But for everyone who's new to the game, let us briefly summarize who we are talking about. Originally known as the Göktürk, they were a Turkic people from Central Asia. They cultivated a semi-nomadic lifestyle, which means that they did have steady homes, but left for their summer or winter residences in the north and south, respectively. Thus, they could easily deal with the massive temperature fluctuations that are so characteristic of the steppe. Their society was clearly structured by hierarchy and ancient Turkic law, but also encouraged meritocracy, giving power to individuals based on ability and talent instead of wealth, social class, or ethnicity. Ever since the year 439, the Turks, whose ruling dynasty was called Ashina, are recorded to have lived in the Altai Mountains between modern-day Kazakhstan, Mongolia, China, and Russia. The Chinese connected them to the Hungnu, or Xiongnu, the first great steppe empire, which had collapsed a few centuries earlier. Being skilled in warfare and blacksmithing, the Turks constructed their own weaponry and armory. But they were politically subservient to the Rouran Khaganate, a steppe empire of Mongolic origin, also known as the Apar among the Turks. In 552, the Turks' new leader, Buman, rebelled and defeated the Apar army in two major battles. Proclaiming himself Khagan, supreme ruler, Buman established the Turk Khaganate with a new capital at Otukun, a legendary forest from which the Kut, the life force in Tengrism, emanates. Buman's sons took over and eradicated the Apar in Asia. Buman's younger brother Istemi, controlling the western part of the state, pursued the other fleeing Apar to the Ponto-Caspian area, thereby annexing Central Asia in the process. The Turks then defeated the Hephthalite Empire, a state whose ruling dynasty had also emerged from the Altai. Under Buman's son Mukun, the Turks conquered the Turkic Kyrgyz and the Mongolic Khitan in Asia. Within just 8 years, they had not only created their own empire, but also annihilated several major powers and subdued tribes that had been reckoned unsubduable before. In the process, the Turks created the first transcontinental steppe empire ever. But in Central Asia, new danger loomed as they now bordered the Sassanian Persian Empire along the Oxus River. This is where our story picks up, because it was this situation that caught the attention of the Eastern Romans, previously unaware of the Turks. The Eastern Roman Empire had become massive shortly before the Turks emerged. This state, which is also known as Byzantium in modern times, stretched from the Balkans to the Euphrates River and included the Levant, Cyprus, and Egypt in its realm. After the fall of the original Western Roman Empire in the 5th century at the hands of Germanic king Odoacer, the Eastern Roman emperors faced continuous threats from various Germanic tribes. But in the 6th century, Emperor Justinian the Great launched significant military campaigns, reclaiming parts of Italy, North Africa, and Spain from the Vandals and Goths, briefly restoring Roman grandeur. Nonetheless, his efforts against the Sassanian Persian Empire in the east were less successful, leading to 2 decades of conflict. In our contemporary world, the rule of Khosrow, Sassanian King of Kings, is just as renowned as Justinian's rule. At that time, Khosrow's conflict with Justinian centered on the southern Caucasus, particularly in the Lazark War, involving Romans, Persians, and local groups like the Laziks, Alans, Sabirs, and Armenians in modern-day Georgia. The Sabirs were Turkic, by the way. This inconclusive war ended with a treaty that made Lazica a Roman vassal, while Rome paid regular tribute to Persia. The price of recognition was high. Then, after bolstering his army, Khosrow eyed Bactria and Sogdia, yet being hesitant to assert his claims due to the Hephthalites' presence. Although not a direct threat, the Hephthalites were at their cultural and economic peak, controlling many tribes under their flag. Lacking regional allies, Khosrow faced a strategic dilemma, which changed with the sudden arrival of the Turks. Khosrow and Istemi allied against the Hephthalites, spurred by the Sogdians' request for help. The Sogdians, under Hephthalite rule but fearing oppression, turned to the Turks interestingly and not their culturally related Persian neighbors. Istemi then invaded Hephthalite territory, reaching as far as Bukhara, while Persian forces conquered Bactria. This war ended Hephthalite control and expanded both the Turks' and Persians' influence in Central Asia. Later, Istemi even invaded Persian lands, leading Khosrow to propose the Oxus River as a border, which Istemi accepted, marrying his daughter Kayan to the Persian king. This non-aggression pact brought long-lasting peace to the region, with Istemi's forces retreating to Sogdia. Yet, after having observed these events, the Romans started considering an alliance with the Turks against Persia, as tensions in the region were about to escalate once again. In a pivotal turn of events, the Sogdians had successfully smuggled silkworms from China through Mongolia to the Eastern Roman Empire, just a few years prior to the defeat of the Hephthalites. Their economic espionage enabled the Romans, especially in mainland Greece, to produce silk on their own. This, in turn, significantly undermined the Persian silk monopoly in several markets and shifted the economic balance across Eurasia, to the benefit of the Sogdians, mostly. Capitalizing on this situation, the merchant people, now under Turkic rule, requested Istemi to negotiate with the Sassanian Empire for permanent trading rights on Persian land. After all, the Sogdians had much more to offer than just silk. Meanwhile, Istemi was busy rebuilding the region after decades of neglect. He had roads, fortifications, and even irrigation canals repaired. With hesitation, he agreed to the plan and sent a Sogdian envoy to Ctesiphon, the Persian capital in Iraq. There, they were indeed welcomed by the Persians. King Khosrow decided to buy all the goods of the Sogdians, and then have all the goods burned publicly in the city center. This was a clear signal of Persian hostility towards the Sogdian trade offer. This action understandably shocked the merchants, who quickly left for home and reported back to Istemi. Now, he started to get directly involved in this affair. The king of the Turks sent a second envoy, this time comprising Turkic officials, to Ctesiphon. They were, again, welcomed and even invited to a banquet with the Persian king. But several of the Turks fell ill afterward, leading the rest of the group to return home hastily. It was obvious that the Turks had been poisoned, which was another signal from the Persians, this time directed at the Turks. But consequently, and probably unintentionally, Khosrau's actions only pushed Istemi further towards Byzantium. Because a wealthy and politically influential Sogdian called Maniach approached him to seek official diplomatic ties with the Romans in Constantinople. This move aimed for the Sogdian traders to bypass blocked Persian markets and access Roman territories directly while offering the Turks a potential geopolitical ally against Persia. In 568, Istemi sent Maniach and several Turkic diplomats on this mission. After crossing the Ponto-Caspian region, they arrived in Constantinople. There, the envoys met Emperor Justin II, the son and successor of Justinian the Great. The new emperor was quite impressed by the Turks' accomplishments so far. A conversation between him and the Turkic officials is recorded in the fragments of Menander Protector. According to him, the Turks made clear that they had not only conquered the Hephthalites, but also permanently administered their cities, being a civilized people, so to speak. The Turks even swore on their leader Istemi's honor that they were not lying. Justin became even more impressed and openly asked for an alliance. As Istemi was the one to decide, Justin asked Zamarchus, his Greek chief diplomat, to accompany Maniach and the Turks back to Central Asia. Following an arduous journey to the east, Zamarchus finally arrived in Sogdia. Maniach immediately introduced him to the local Turk governor. Zamarchus was also offered high-quality iron by several Turkic inhabitants who had been accustomed to blacksmithing for centuries. After passing various ceremonies, these included jumping over the fire, the diplomats were transported to a mountain in the east called Akdağ, the White Mountain. Here, Zamarchus noted interesting aspects of Turkic life. For example, Istemi was noted to sit on a golden throne. Outside his golden yurt, there were golden peacocks, silver animals, hangings, and clothing of figured silk. In general, the Turks had erected statues of peoples and animals, which, according to Menander Protector, who conveyed Zamarchus's report, were in no way of lesser quality than those in Constantinople. These words should mean a lot to any historian who has ever come across Zamarchus's report. Yet for some reason, this aspect is being mostly ignored by those who actually write about the ancient Turks or talk about them on TV, even in Turkey, a country that is most proud of Turkish history. If a Roman diplomat is stating that the Turks, uncivilized and chaotic war-loving nomads, according to the old Western cliché, were on par with Roman art, then we can rest assured that they were certainly lords of a sophisticated culture. Their deep lore and understanding of governance have been overlooked for very long. Likewise, this applies to their predecessors in the region, the Hephthalites, and the Ruran in Mongolia. Perhaps some filmmakers, especially in Turkey, should take notice. Next, the envoy was introduced to Istemi Kagan, sitting on the aforementioned golden throne. Zamarchus brought forward a cordial message by Emperor Justin, which was as follows.
Κυβερνήτης τόσων πολλών εθνών, ο μεγάλος μας αυτοκράτορας στέλνει το ακόλουθο μήνυμα μέσω εμού. Ήθε η καλή τύχη να σε συνοδεύει πάντα, ήθε να μεθάς από την επιτυχία, εσύ που είσαι φίλος μας και έχεις καλές προθέσεις απέναντι στο Ρωμαϊκό κράτος, ήθε να νικάς πάντα τους αντιπάλους σου, ήθε η ζήλια που μπορεί να καταστρέψει τους νόμους της φιλίας να μείνει μακριά, πολύ μακριά από μας. Οι φυλές των Τούρκων και οι υποτελείς των Τούρκων είναι φίλοι μου. Μακάρι να σκέφτεστε το ίδιο για μας.
Istemi responded warmly to this message, calling Justin his friend and accepting the offer. In a joyous mood, the Turk ruler and Greek diplomat celebrated a festival of friendship in the evening hours, drinking some wine, and sealing the Turko-Roman pact. On the next morning, Zemarcus followed Istemi to Talas, which is in Kyrgyzstan. There, he witnessed the outcry of a Persian diplomat who had also been present during dinner and appeared to have followed them to Talas. The Persian urged Istemi to revert his decision and send the Roman diplomat away. Istemi did indeed send Zemarcus back, but not before informing him of an imminent Turkic invasion of Persian lands. The Persian diplomat was stunned and left for the port in Iraq. Zemarcus did not depart alone, though, as he led a group of at least 106 Turkic merchants and officials to Constantinople. On their way to Anatolia, the group had been ambushed by a 4,000-men strong Persian army in the Caucasus, but the Alans, loyal to the Turks, safeguarded the guests. In the city of World's Desire, the Turks took permanent residence in the function of both merchants and diplomats. Perhaps they opened a sort of embassy. Thus, the alliance between Turks and Romans was fully established. The Persians, taking note of these developments, undertook preparations for the escalation of the conflict. But at this point in time, their own position had been severely weakened. After all, the Turko-Roman pact included two of the three major powers in Eurasia. By the year 575, Istemi's rule was inherited by his eldest son, Tardush, who succeeded as the new ruler of the western Göktürk Empire. It encompassed circa 4 million square kilometers. Istemi's younger son, Tamgan, became viceroy and served as a governor in the Sogdia region. During this period, rumors about Emperor Justin's mental condition began to spread in Constantinople simultaneously. Yet Theophylax Simocatta, a very important historiographer and arguably the last great European chronicler of late antiquity, attested Justin to be of absolutely clear mind, capable of making important decisions. It seems that one of these clear decisions was made in 576, when he sent Valentinos, his new chief diplomat, as another ambassador to the Turks. But after years of mutual trust, a diplomatic incident took place in Sogdia shortly after his arrival. Tamgan, the governor, accused the Roman diplomat of treachery. According to the Turk, the Romans had betrayed his father, Istemi, by eventually allowing the Avars to take refuge near the Roman borders in Ruthenia and the Carpathian Basin. Indeed, the Romans had granted land to the Avars, while also maintaining the alliance with the Göktürks. This was certainly problematic because a part of the Avars were deemed to be the very same Ruran refugees who had fled from Mongolia to the west. These were the former masters of the Turks. Just as Kara and Mukan had annihilated the other Ruran in Asia, Istemi and his sons were vividly trying to punish the other group in Europe. Tamgan's personal disapproval notwithstanding, Valentinos continued to Ordukent, the city of the army, also known as Suyab, to meet Tardush next. After Istemi had established the Turkic capital here, Tardush expanded its scope after taking over. But the ruler did not affirm the Roman alliance either. Instead, he made the idle threat of invading the Dnieper, Danube, and Maritsa regions, thereby attacking both the Avars and Byzantium. Valentinos had no other choice but to return to Constantinople with empty hands and a heavy diplomatic burden. Simultaneously, Tardush ordered the Kudagurs, a large tribal group within the Turkic Onagur Federation, to attack several Greek and Gothic settlements. They conquered Pantikapion, also known as Bosporus, on the Crimean Peninsula. For the next 2 decades, a joint Kutrygur-Göktürk army even besieged Chersonesus, one of the oldest Greek colonies, effectively disrupting Roman trade in the region. The Turko-Roman alliance had seemingly been broken due to geopolitical circumstances. There were no cultural or ideological issues between Turks and Greeks, but the mutual respect for foreign policy interests was absent. Yet despite losing the other as an ally, both the Roman Empire and the Turkic Empire engaged in military activities against Persia. In the years 588 and 589, in the middle of the Göktürk Civil War, the freshly crowned Baga Khagan invaded Persian territory from Sogdia. Baga led a large Turkic army across the Oxus River, joined by Hephthalite forces, and seized several cities in Bactria, now northern Afghanistan. Unlike Istemi had done in the past, Baga initiated a full-scale war against the Persians, pushing westward into Hyrcania between Iran and Turkmenistan. The Persian king Hormizd, despite his Turkic roots through his maternal grandfather Istemi, clearly opposed the invasion. He tasked General Bahram Choban with repelling the Turks. In April 588, Bahram decisively defeated the Turkic forces at the Battle of Hyrcanian Rock, reportedly killing Baga. The battle's specifics are vague, with likely exaggerated numbers of 300,000 Turks against 12,000 Iranians. More realistic estimates suggest about 10,000 to 15,000 Turkic troops faced 10,000 Persians. In 589, Bahram regained Herat and conquered the Khagan's Golden Throne, thereby extending his reach to Bukhara. Amidst a new civil war in Iran, he crowned himself Persian king, but was defeated by Khosrow, ironically with Byzantine support. Fleeing to the Turks, his former adversaries, Bahram became general for the Turkic army and even foiled a plot against Tardush. Later, Khosrow orchestrated Bahram's assassination through a Persian agent. Although Persian control over Sogdia and Bactria was brief, these regions temporarily became part of the Persian domain, until returning to Turkic governance after the Second Turko-Persian War in 607. During these conflicts, the Romans obviously did not assist. In fact, after the last envoy by Valentinos, seemingly nothing noteworthy transpired between Constantinople and Ordukent. This is a very curious case. After a rather intensive diplomatic exchange and the siege of several Roman cities in Crimea by the Turks, you'd think that both sides would either go to war or try to ease tensions. It is likely that the latter occurred, as none of the sources report any military confrontation between Roman and Turkic armies. But this was not the end of the Turko-Roman Alliance. To the contrary, it was just about to pick up. As we jump 40 years forward on our timeline, we can witness both a Roman and a Turkic leader gaining massive power and influence at the same time: Heraclius and Tong Yabgu. Heraclius rose to power in 608 as a co-leader of a revolt, breaking from the tradition of non-active monarchs by personally leading military campaigns. He established a new dynasty, skillfully managed political and military crises, implemented innovative economic reforms, and enhanced Byzantine military strategies. The ongoing war with Sassanian Persia, reignited in 602, stretched over nearly 3 decades. After initially being pushed back to Constantinople by Persian forces, Heraclius orchestrated a successful counteroffensive. This conflict extended into the Greater Caucasus, involving the Göktürks once more in the geopolitical struggle of the Middle East and beyond. During the last war against Persia, the Göktürks along the Hephthalites had reached Iranian territory too, arriving in the ancient city of Rai. For some unknown reason, the Turkic king in the west at the time, Shigai, had the army withdrawn back into Central Asia. As a result, the Armenian general of the Sassanids, a certain Bagratuni, was able to defeat without difficulty the troops of the Hephthalites near Balkh in Afghanistan. 8 years later, the Göktürks, under the leadership of Tong Yabgu, regained control of Afghanistan. Tong was the brother of Shigai and became king in 618. He was known as a capable, energetic, and somewhat careful ruler. By this time, the great Göktürk Khaganate had long been split into a western and an eastern half. The Turks in the west ruled completely independent from any influences in the east, even surpassing them in military prowess by the time of Tong's ascension. The king even established friendly diplomatic relations with the Chinese Tang Empire, normally hostile towards both Göktürk empires, in order to pressure the Eastern Turks geopolitically. But Tong had larger ambitions than any of his predecessors. While the Turkic armies had been present on the European continent since Istemi's era, the Ponto-Caspian steppe had not been integrated into the Göktürk realm. Tong wanted to change that. He wanted to completely annex the Caucasus and perhaps, at a later time, even invade and annex the Crimean Peninsula. Emperor Heraclius, who had re-established contacts with the Turks in the meantime, promised the Turkic king gifts and booty if he helped defeat the Persians in the Caucasus. Tong sent an army of 1,000 Turks through dangerous Persian territory to deliver this very message to the Roman emperor. Then Tong ordered his nephew Burushad, the Wolf Prince, into battle. In 627, the Turks besieged the fortified city of Derbent in Dagestan, which is today part of Russia, with an army described in the sources as Khazar. It is not a coincidence that the Khazars, a few years later, indeed established their own empire in this very area, the Northern Caucasus. From here, the Turks were able to invade Caucasian Albania, not to be confused with modern-day Albania on the Balkans, and move into Persia. These Khazars were victorious and occupied numerous settlements. When the Romans joined from Anatolia, the Turks besieged Tiflis in the Kingdom of Iberia, also not to be confused with the Iberian Peninsula. The Armenian historian Ceballos mentions in his chronicles that Heraclius and Tong Yabgu later met in a camp, embraced respectfully, gave each other gifts, conducted a feast in the Armenian highlands, and lastly became brothers. This might be the very first time that a Graeco-Roman ruler met a Göktürk ruler personally. But the Turks completely retreated to the steppes, rather unexpectedly. They had received the message that Tong Yabgu had been murdered. According to some scholars, the murderer was Tong Yabgu's own son. Others think it was his uncle. His tragic end notwithstanding, Tong Yabgu went down in history as the Göktürk conqueror of the Caucasus, along with his Roman ally Heraclius. But he could have achieved much more for his empire had he not been killed by his own flesh and blood. This joint Roman-Turkic victory against Persia is a fitting and definitive end to the alliance between the Eastern Roman Empire and the Göktürk Empire, as some years later the Byzantines were driven away by the new Arab Caliphate. While the Arabs completely overran the Persians and the Chinese subjugated the Göktürks. But even still, this was not the last time that a Roman and ancient Turkic people would meet. In fact, not very far from the battlefields, somewhere in Bactria that had been integrated by the Turks, a new Turkic dynasty would rise to power. Like the Khazars in the Caucasus, these Turkic warriors would take on local customs and new religions. Their greatest ruler, though, was to be bestowed the honorific title Phromo Caesaro, which means Caesar of Rome, by Byzantine ambassadors. To the local population and their neighbors, they were simply known as Turk Shahi, the Turk kings of Afghanistan.